Welcome to this edition of CBN News Weekend. I'm Charlene Aaron. Well, you've probably seen it on social media. A second undercover video calling out Planned Parenthood is making waves. This new one shows Dr. Mary Gatter, a past president of Planned Parenthood, haggling over the price of aborted baby body parts. Caitlin Burke has more.
It's similar to last week's viral video and equally as disturbing.
What would you expect for intact tissue? What sort of compensation? What sort of...
Well, why don't you start by telling me what you're used to paying?
Planned Parenthood says the payments discussed in this video, as well as last week's, refer to payments for the cost of getting the tissue, which is legal. However, Dr. Mary Gatter, the Planned Parenthood medical director seen here, later goes on to suggest modifying the abortion procedure in order to get more intact fetuses. That's against the law.
And then if we want to pursue this mutually, I'll mention this to Ian in terms of how he feels about using a less crunchy technique to get more whole specimens.
At the beginning of the conversation, Gatter suggested receiving $75 for a tissue specimen. By the end of the interview, she's questioning whether $100 is enough.
It's been years since I've talked about compensation, so let me just figure out what others are getting, and if this is in the ballpark, then that's fine. If it's still low, then we can talk about it. I want to lend with you more.
Planned Parenthood is defending Gatter. A spokesperson for the organization says there's nothing in the video to suggest any violation of law or improper activity. The White House dismissed the possibility of pulling Planned Parenthood's federal funding. The organization got nearly $530 million in taxpayer funding last year. Republican presidential hopeful Carly Fiorina blasted the Democrats' stance on abortion in a video released over social media.
Democrats have always fought for a policy that says it is not a life until it leaves the hospital. Hillary Clinton has fought to preserve that policy. And we now have a moment in this nation to take some real action here. We can decide, finally, to defund Planned Parenthood.
Following the release of the first video on July 14th, 3 congressional committees and top officials in several states said they would launch investigations into Planned Parenthood's handling of fetal tissue. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Dr. Alveda King is calling out the Congressional Black Caucus for remaining silent on the Planned Parenthood debate. The daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote an open letter to the CBC, pointing out that Planned Parenthood targets African Americans for abortions. She commented on the latest video released by the Center for Medical Progress, saying surely now the CBC will yank their support of any industry that is involved in the illegal harvesting and selling of body parts of aborted babies. But yet we hear nothing. Your silence is deafening. She says the videos are shocking and that the CBC should denounce Planned Parenthood's behavior. She goes on to say, take the lead in calling for the defunding of Planned Parenthood. It's time to stand up for truth. CBC, you cannot serve both God and money. You cannot serve both Planned Parenthood and your constituents. And for more on this, you can go to cbnnews.com for more. An effort to defund the nation's largest abortion provider is gaining traction in Congress. Republican Congresswoman Diane Black from Tennessee has introduced a bill to defund Planned Parenthood, and at least 50 other GOP senators are calling on the Obama administration to investigate the federally funded organization. 2 recently released undercover videos show 2 different Planned Parenthood directors discussing the sale of baby body parts. U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch says the Department of Justice will review the videos and determine what steps need to be taken. Meanwhile, some Democrats are asking the Department of Justice to investigate if any laws were violated in the recording of those undercover videos. Well, the number of teenage girls using the morning after pill has spiked. More than 1 in 5 sexually active girls report using the emergency contraceptive. That's a dramatic increase from a decade earlier when 1 in 12 used the pill. A new report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that easy access and relaxed age restrictions have led to the increase. Teens can now buy the drug without a prescription. Well, so where do most Americans stand when it comes to abortion? CBN's Paul Strand recently spoke with a Catholic professor who says most Americans dislike abortions, but few want them all banned. He believes that this fact could mean there are new chances to work out real compromises that could lead to fewer abortions.
We're talking with Charles Camosy, who's written Beyond the Abortion Wars. Charles is a professor at Fordham University. And Charles, first tell me, why is the binary pro-life, pro-choice picture really much more complicated than what we think? That it's just pro-lifers, pro-choicers, that's it?
Well, if you just talk to enough people about abortion, you realize that those two binary categories just don't work at all. So most Americans are highly skeptical of abortion. Most Americans don't like abortion. They think it's a bad thing. Most Americans also want exceptions for like life, rape, maybe fetal deformities. So if you're that person, are you pro-life? Yes. Are you pro-choice? Yep. So at the end of the day, this kind of binary is just really unhelpful for what Americans actually think. It's also unhelpful in that it pits us against each other, right? So if you're in that camp, you're definitely against that camp, and we're in some sort of war. And my book, which is trying to get beyond the abortion wars, needed to start there, needed to say, let's just admit that it's way more complicated than this.
So now why does this give you hope?
There's a lot of hope because, again, most Americans, whether they self-identify as pro-life and pro-choice, and often has very little to do with how they actually think about abortion, right? It has to do with politics and something else. But what they actually think about abortion, there's wide overlap. People don't like most abortions, whether they're pro-life or pro-choice, and people generally want exceptions for life and sexual violence, again, whether they're pro-life or pro-choice.
And there's two groups coming along that especially give you hope. Can you tell me about the two groups that you think are going to really change the debate?
Yeah, this has me really, really excited, and it's not sort of wishful thinking, it's what the numbers actually say. So the future of this country, to anybody that's paying attention, are millennials and Hispanics. Those are the people that will lead us into the next generation. And both groups are really disproportionately skeptical of abortion, really. So for instance, millennials, the Pain Capable Act, which is coming for a vote, if you ask people who are young versus people who are old, the younger people actually support the 20-week ban compared to people who are older, Hispanics as well. If you ask young people to declare whether they're pro-life or pro-choice, those that say they're pro-life are 51% of which say, I'm extremely pro-life, this matters a lot to me. Of those who are pro-choice, only 21% say that about them. So there's an intensity gap as well.
Well, now what would you say to pro-life absolutists who say any kind of compromise is unacceptable morally?
We need to make a distinction between what we argue about ethics and morality, and what we do in the public sphere and what kind of laws we push. I mean, you've been doing this job a long time. You see what happens in D.C. There's just no way that an exceptionalist bill has a prayer of passing anything and anytime soon in this town. There are things that do have a chance to pass, right? We could talk about those. But just to give you an example, if you don't have an exception for sexual violence, media, politicians, virtually anybody you talk to will immediately go there and say, we can't take you seriously because you just don't care about women who suffered sexual violence, right? And we saw that with the legitimate rape comment, right, in the 2012. Yeah. Everything was about that. Everything became about that. And so just practically and politically, we need to have those exceptions. Again, I think we need to make a distinction between the practical and the political and the moral on the other hand, though.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Charles Camosy, author of Beyond the Abortion Wars. Charles Camosy, professor at Fordham University. Thanks, Charles.
Coming up, a call to protect military recruitment centers. Hear the changes one lawmaker is calling for after the deadly shootings in Tennessee.
Inside every child is a hero, a leader, a friend to others, someone who helps out, who does the right thing, who dreams of what they can be, but they still need our help.
What should I do? What should I say? How should I feel?
That's where Superbook comes in. It provides moral and spiritual truths through situations children can relate to, teaching God's Word to the children you love. Join the Superbook DVD Club and receive Superbook's newest episodes as they're available, plus 2 copies to share with others, all for your gift of only $25. Get Superbook today and watch the miracles happen.
We're learning new details about the Tennessee shooting that took the lives of 5 U.S. service members last week. A report released recently says it took Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz 3 to 5 minutes to walk through a gate and shoot his way into the Navy Marine Reserve Center. A service member inside the building saw the 24-year-old shooter approaching and fired at him with a personal weapon. At the same time, Marines were running from room to room, trying to get their fellow service members to safety. The incident sent shockwaves of outrage across the country. Now, private citizens across the country are taking up the task of guarding military recruiting centers.
This is ridiculous. We trust them with weapons of mass destruction to go defend our country, but when they come home and they can't even have a sidearm, that makes absolutely no sense.
In Texas, volunteers are standing guard outside the Wichita Falls military recruitment offices 5 days a week now.
As it stands right now, they're not allowed to arm themselves or protect themselves. So, you know what? We're gonna do it for them. You know, if somebody rolls up and tries something like that, well, we're gonna do what we can to stop it.
And many are asking why service members are prohibited from carrying firearms at military recruitment centers. Well, CBN News' Ephraim Graham recently spoke with a Virginia state senator who is very concerned about what this means for the military. Let's take a look.
Joining me now is Virginia State Senator Dick Black, who is calling on Virginia's governor to arm the military in the wake of the Chattanooga shooting. Senator Black, thank you so much for being here.
I'm very pleased to be with you.
A question many Americans are asking: why aren't soldiers who are working at recruitment centers allowed to be armed?
You know, it's an amazing thing. This goes back to the days of Bill Clinton, when you recall he came into office. And the Clintons had a reputation for having a loathing of the military. He issued very strict orders that said there would be no loaded firearms on our military installations. And as a consequence, the armed forces have now turned into the disarmed forces.
So why are you calling for the National Guard to step in and protect our service members?
Well, what's happening now is, you know, the war on terror, while the federal government seems to have lost its focus, it is a very real thing. We are under incessant attack. Of course, it started 9/11 with 3,000 Americans being killed by Al-Qaeda. Now we have this terrible incident in Chattanooga where we had attacks on 2 installations, one on the Marine Recruiting Center, and then one on another installation. We had 4 Marines killed. We had a sailor killed, and unfortunately, on the Marine Recruiting Center, there is a prominent decal that says "No guns allowed." There are bullet holes all through the windows, so obviously, the decal did not deter the jihadists who decided to attack the Marines.
We've seen action in at least a half dozen states. Why hasn't the governor of Virginia taken action yet, you think?
You know, I wrote to the governor day before yesterday, and I also spoke with the chief of staff to the governor, and I urged him. I said, look, there is no excuse for telling our troops that if you're attacked by an enemy, you're to run and hide. That's not what Americans do. But Governor McAuliffe is very close to the Clintons. The Clintons are very intensely anti-gun and anti-military. They have a long history of this. And so he is trying to pave the way in Virginia for Hillary Clinton's ascendancy to the presidency. He's not going to do anything that's going to be out of alignment with her policies.
Senator Black, we're seeing more civilians taking on the role of protecting our service members. Do you think that's a good idea? You know,
I'm all in favor of it, but it's somewhat like hiring people to protect our police from criminals. We have police whose purpose is to protect us from criminals. We have military people whose purpose is to protect us and our nation from terrorists like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, who are increasingly targeting people. You know, I have personally been targeted by ISIS. They came out in their worldwide propaganda magazine and they singled out 3 American figures as enemies of ISIS. One was Rick Santorum, who's a presidential candidate. One was the head of the CIA mission in Afghanistan. And the third was me. And part of it is because I have talked at length about what I believe is their strategy in the Middle East, of toppling Syria in order to establish an Islamic caliphate. And so we've actually got Americans in this country being targeted. They published a list of 30 military families with their names, their addresses, their family members. And they're really calling on people who follow the most radical strand of Islam to go out and to kill. And I think we've got to become a harder people. We've got to return to, you know, get away from the days of Barney Frank and move to the days of John Wayne, where Americans didn't run and hide. Americans stood and fought to the death.
Got less than 20 seconds, but real quick, what are your colleagues saying?
I think most people, both my colleagues and the people at large, think that it makes good sense to have soldiers armed.
All right.
Honestly, people are absolutely dismayed to discover that we have people in our armed forces who are prohibited from carrying arms.
All right, Senator Black, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
It's great to be with you.
In Jordan, the uncle of the Chattanooga shooter is under investigation. Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz spent several months at his uncle's home in Jordan last year. Authorities believe that may have been a turning point for the otherwise all-American boy. Jordanian officials say they're working in close coordination with the U.S. government. Up next, Amazing Grace. A new play tells the story behind the famous song. We'll take you to New York and show you what it's all about. Well, it is one of the best-known songs of all time, but many people don't know the true tale behind Amazing Grace. Now that inspiring story has been turned into a musical, Angela Zatopek takes us behind the scenes for this look at the new play from New York City.
It's a song that's been heard in churches, schools, and yes, even presidential speeches.
Amazing Grace.
Well, now it's hitting a different kind of stage right here in New York City. Amazing Grace is on Broadway.
Why can't you see?
Lighting up the stage with Tony Award-winning actors, Amazing Grace tells the story behind the famous hymn and its author.
It's the story of John Newton, who was a horrific slave trader, who through his faith became the man who wrote the hymn and started the abolitionist movement in England.
One day wandered into a library and pulled a book off the shelf at random that said John Newton. I had no idea who he was. So I sat and I read this book cold, and this amazing story opened up.
Newton, the slave trader, became a slave himself when his crew betrayed him in West Africa. Serving an African duchess, he endured the same type of abuse he once handed out.
Let the wind and the waves wash away the fool I used to be.
Rescued years later, Newton converted to Christianity and eventually became a prominent voice in the abolitionist movement.
I thought the world needs to know about John Newton. I was embarrassed. I didn't know anything about him. when I started this project. And now, of course, I feel like the world needs to know John Newton.
Despite its graphic depiction of the slave trade, composer Christopher Smith says it's for all audiences.
Nobody in this industry originally believed that there was any audience for this. The desire to be loved in spite of your faults is not a religious impulse or a secular impulse. It's a human impulse.
We'll make a song.
Immensely relevant and resonant story for our time right now, and hopeful about second chances and about making a change and about starting with yourself to make a bigger change.
Producers guarantee that audiences will leave inspired by its musical score. This song is unique in so many ways. It's crossed gender and generational boundaries for ages, as it seems to unite people at every turn. It also seems to give people a sense of hope, which is something our country desperately needs right now. I'm Angela Zatopek, CBN News, New York City.
And that looks absolutely amazing. Certainly going to have to check that out. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to CBN News Weekend. Before we end today, let's take a look at what CBN is doing here and around the world. Superbook is now airing on Bible TV, Germany's largest Christian channel. 2 episodes air each weekend, reaching children throughout Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and other neighboring European nations. Viewers can also connect with Superbook on Facebook and the Superbook website, where they can play games, learn more about God, and discover Bible stories in fun and exciting ways. And in Nepal, Operation Blessing is providing shelter and building homes for orphans. 64 children lost their home when a deadly earthquake destroyed their orphanage last April. Operation Blessing is providing temporary shelter while teams rebuild the orphanage. And you can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to their website at ob.org. And that's going to do it for this hour of the CBN News Weekend. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. And stay up to date with CBN News through Facebook and Twitter. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a wonderful weekend. God bless.